Hey everybody, Zach here, and welcome to the 8th lesson of this RTS tutorial series. In this lesson, we'll be going over how we're going to set up our clocks within the game, otherwise known as game time. So fire up the editor and join me. So here we are for the second section to set up our time, day-night cycle, and our user interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up our simple game clock right now. We're also set up some debugging stuff that I've typically skipped in the previous lessons. However, until we have the HUD set up, I find that these debugging features are useful. So the way we're going to approach this is we are going to wrong folder, sorry. Actually, no, it's the right folder. We are going to create a couple of blueprints first, just to have them on the screen while I talk to you. So the first one we're going to create is a game state. So right-click in your game settings folder that we created in the last session of the first section, or last lesson of the first section. And in all classes, type in game state. And like with game mode, we have a base and a state. We want the base. And like usual, you can guess what the name's going to be. It's going to be RTS underscore game state underscore BP. Now, I'm not going to do anything with it besides save it. I'm going to go back to my blueprints folder. And I'm going to create another folder, which I'm going to call lib, or library. Now, I'm just going to call it library so people know what it's for. And this will store our interfaces, which we'll have a couple of. This will store a function library. And that's about it, actually. It might even store some enums if I decide to put some enums in here. But we're going to create two things today. First, we're going to create a blueprint for the function library and a blueprint for our interface. So right-click, go to Blueprints. Don't go to Blueprint class. Go to Blueprints. And in Blueprints, the second option is Blueprint Function Library. Select that. And we're going to name this RTS Func Lib BP. I'm not sure why. Actually, you know what? Let's rename that. We're going to name it Function Lib. It is a function library. It's all it really is. Next, right-click. Blueprint. Sorry about that. Blueprint class. Actually, let me double check something. Don't go to Blueprint class. Go down to Blueprints and select Blueprint Interface. And we're going to name this RTS GameTime IF for interface. Now, again, we're not going to do anything with this. These three these three blueprints are what we need in order to set up our game time. So the first thing we're going to do is actually sort of set up the clock that we'll use in multiple areas, or multiple ways to pass information from the main clock. Which usually when you're passing information, you're using interfaces. Interfaces allow for multiple blueprints to talk to each other. I use it more for HUDs than anything else. The function library just stores functions that other blueprints can call up. So universal functions we'll put here. Now the reason why we don't have reference casts here is every blueprint will need a different reference cast. And yes, we'll be making another reference cast today. But first, let's fire up the RTS function library we have. I'm going to pin it into here, and I just noticed my secondary window for content is gone. So I'm just going to tag that up there. Alright, so when you open the function library, you already have a new function. Go ahead and rename it, and I'm going to name this Set Game Time. And because I'm going to have a lot of functions in here, I'm already going to put it in a category. And that category will be Game Time. And this is a function to help run. Actually, I'm going to say initiate. No. Actually, no, run was right. Run and pass game time using hours. And this is key. We're going to be using hours to initialize this originally. So we're going to need a few things. We're going to need 3 new inputs. And the first one will be delta time, which will be a float. And this is simply delta time is always It's not changing time like delta normally is. It is, however, the time it takes to render the previous frame. So a faster computer, if we didn't have delta time in and we're just using standard ticks, might go, or a faster screen might cause issues in terms of, you're suddenly getting more ticks. So we can account for that by controlling with delta time. If you come from Unity, like I did, and you know C#, this is when you do times multiplied by delta time. Same idea here. If you don't come from Unity, don't worry about that. And then we have game speed. And then this is a weird one. This is going to be initial game time. So let me try that again. Added 2 onto that. Compile, save. Don't add the 2 like I did unless you have the uppercase issue like I just did. There we go. Compile, save again. And we need a couple of outputs as well. We're going to get out game time, oddly enough. This is not going to be the initial game time. This is going to be the return, what we want as the tick goes. And then we're also going to need a float. Sorry, not a float, a integer, which I will call day counter, which is counts, actually, no, day count. It's just a better name for me, I think. So with day count, we're going to split this out a little bit. And, okay, so if you come from Unity, I've lied to you slightly. We have to kind of do the control on delta time times time, like you do in Unity. For those who don't come from Unity, again, don't worry about that. I will explain that one, though, right now. So we have our game speed. And this will be a variable we set. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of numbers for this. The way I worked these numbers out was literally just going through and putting different numbers in, extremely large numbers to work out some of the things I worked out, and extremely small numbers to work out some of the other things until I found all the information I was looking for. So game speed needs to be moderated by delta time, so that faster, fresh rates, faster computers aren't causing issues where people are, experiencing time in sort of two different relativities. So we're going to divide our delta time by game time. Now, for those of you who don't know where we're getting delta time from yet, don't worry, I'll explain that all in a minute. And we're going to take the result of this dividend and we're going to add it to the initial game time. Similarly, like when we're moving, what's happening here is, the initial game time, when we start the game, actually is quite literally the initial game time. But every time the tick goes through, it's going to get the old time, which I'll explain where that comes from in a minute, in here, add it to the new time, and that'll become the game time that's here. The next tick, this game time, is going to be the initial game time, added up with the result of that dividend, or division, and it becomes the game time again. Now, because this is in hours, what we need to consider is what happens when we hit 24 hours. Well, we get a day then. So how do we tell it that, at 24 hours, we hit a day? Well, built in to if I say Unity, built into Unreal is this division, whole and remainder. And you'll notice that one's a float and one is an integer. The remainder, for those of you who don't remember arithmetic, the remainder when you do division, if you have 11 divided by 2 would be 5 point something. It'd be 2, sorry, did I say 11 divided by 2 would be 5, 1 over, so 5.2 actually. Sorry, 5.5. I can do basic arithmetic in my head. It's 5.5. That 0.5 is the remainder. And in this case, that remainder is going to be our hours, which will go into game time. Our return value is that first number, that original 5. I picked a bad number by using 2 and 11. Sorry about that. So that 5 before the decimal would be the return value. We want this to return every time that the game time hits 24. So to do that, we set the division to 24. Alright, we can save and compile that and close it out. We are done with the function library for today. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to go into my library. I'm going to open up my interface. Now, in interfaces, you can't put anything really in here. You can just set up what the function will use. So I'm going to name this function update game speed. And I need one input. Oh, sorry, actually, let me just... Yep, I need one input, and that is going to be of a class float, or a type float, sorry, not class. And I'm going to name it speed multiplier. Speed multiplier will be what we call the function we're going to make to change... Oh, this is not tagged to the top there. The function we make to change the speed at which the game is running. So if you ever played almost any RTS and any turn-based strategy, you can, sorry, not turn-based strategy, any RTS like Hearts of Iron, which I referenced before, I realize, you can set the speed to go faster or slower. We're going to have something similar. We're going to even have a nice little bar graph to represent that speed. So let's close that out. Let's go back to our blueprints. Let's go to our game settings and now into our game state. So it'll open up into the viewport. You should have all the options for construction script, event graph, and so forth. If you don't, it will say somewhere up here, open full blueprint. Click that. You should get the setting and head into your event graph. We are going to start with game tick. We are going to initialize our clock here. Actually, I just want to think before I do that if we want to do something else. Let me just double check something. Yeah, we'll start with our clock. Actually, no, we will start with setting up for some things that we'll do down the road. So, first thing we're going to do is go to macros, actually. I'm going to create a reference casts again. And it will be execute, as an execute there. And then we'll have an execute on the output, if I can click the right thing, which we'll name then. And just like before, we are going to cast out. But we're going to get to the controller. So we want get player controller. Off the controller, we want to cast to our controller. So that would be the RTS game controller. And off that, as the RTS game controller BP, we want to promote to a variable. And this will be our controller ref. We won't need this today, but we'll come back to it later on. In categories, I'm going to make a new category called references. And I'm going to hook that up to the output. Going to compile and save, close the reference cast out, and return to the event graph. In the event graph, I'm just going to drag off of here and type in sequence. You actually can shortcut that, by the way, by just typing S, but I don't like doing that. And I'm going to put in... Oops, sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm going to take my reference cast, put it up here, and plug it into the 0. Remember, reference casts always need to be first when we make them. Sorry about that. So this is where it gets a bit confusing. We are going to jump back and forth in this blueprint a fair amount today. I'm just going to drag this down first so I have a little bit of room to play with. We are going to initialize the clock. We are going to set everything for initializing it. We are then going to jump up here again. We are going to set the starting information for it, and then we'll actually give it functionality. So I'm going to right click in front of event tick, and I'm going to type in set game time. And you'll get the function we just created in our function library. I'm going to hook up the execute, whatever the heck these things are called. And this delta seconds is what is going into delta time. So this is the amount of time it took to render the last frame. So now that I have that set up, it's setting our time. Now we need to say what the game speed is. And this is where it gets a bit confusing. Actually, all this is going to be a little bit confusing, I think. But, we'll go through it piece by piece. First thing I'm going to create is a new variable. I'll name it game speed. And I'm just thinking about if I want to rename these variables, actually. Because I got confused on my testing and kept switching around this variable and the next variable. Anyway, while I think about that, we're going to just make this a float. We're going to put a new a new category in called Game Speed Settings. And that will go into Game Speed. And this is the one I'm thinking about renaming because I kept putting the wrong variable in. We're going to have another new variable, which we'll name GameTime, which will plug into initial game time. Add a 2 in for a minute, compile, save. Don't do the 2 unless you had the naming issue like I just did. For some reason, my computer loves doing that with the word time. So now we know that it goes into this and that function. It will run this function. I'm going to open that function up or not. Oh, sorry, it's not hooked up properly. I'm going to click on that. We'll get our function. And so every tick, this will run. It will take our game speed and our game time, and it will run it through here. And it will take that information, divide the delta time by the game speed, update the game time, taking the time it took, taking the initial time from the game state, check if it's divided by 24, take the whole value, that first number before the decimal, put it into day count if there is one, and then it will reset it, by the way, but we'll set the reset elsewhere. And it'll take the remainder and add that back into game time, which will cycle back through here. Okay. I'm going to now pause for half a second. So there might be a little bit of a jump. All I'm doing is double checking that my recording device has properly recorded the windows since they were popping in and out from the actual frame there. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. It was recording correctly. I just wanted to make sure. So now that we've sort of initialized the game time, we need to actually set our game time. So we're going to take our game time, which before we go any further, I'm going to make sure it's in the right area, which is game speed settings. And we're going to set it here. And we'll plug game time into game time. And we're going to create a new variable, which won't be part of game settings. It'll actually be, game speed settings. It will be part of a category which I will call calendar. And that is day counter. And that will be a integer. As I've already said, this will be in a category which I will call calendar, because all our variables related to calendar will go in there. Compile so it creates a default. We will set it, so drag it and set. We will plug day count into day counter. And now we've initialized it, but we aren't done here. We actually have 2 more steps to do here. We have 2 functions we'll need to plug in, but we haven't made those functions yet. So before we do that, though, let's actually initialize. Sorry, we've initialized our game time. Let's actually set our beginning sort of time. So I'm going to add in 1 more pin here. So I have 2. We'll actually have another one towards the end, I believe. Yeah, actually we will. I know we will. I don't have to say believe. I know we will. And I'm going to create 3 new integer variables. And they will be hours, minutes, and seconds. And let's compile real quick. So we have that default option. I'm going to set a new category called clock. Oops, sorry, no, that actually will be calendar, but we will use clock later on. Hey, no, this is clock, sorry. I don't know why I had a moment there where I thought otherwise. I'm going to set them all to clock. And we are going to expose all 3 of these. So just click, make that, or you can click here too to make it expose them. And, you know, I'm just going to type in quick tooltip, which will be int variable that holds seconds game time. Going to copy that. Going to get rid of that, didn't mean to click that, paste that in there, change that to minutes, and do the same here, just change that out to hours. I know these are fairly obvious, but still. Alright, so what are we going to do with this? Well, we are going to use these to set our game time. So drag off game time, set it on that first pin there, and then off game time, let's drag back. We're going to add in float plus float, and we're going to add 3 pins. Now, before we go further, I skipped a little step I want to do real quick. In hours, I want to set this to 12. And why we're setting it to 12, we want it to be noon, because if we go into our map and we look up, the sun is pretty much a midday sun. So we're going to set it to noon. Probably a little bit before noon. Maybe it's closer to 11. Let's actually set it to 11, because then the sun won't set so late. I have already tested out my day-night cycle, and I got the sunrise to come up around the right time. The sun sets a little bit later than I wanted. So maybe this is really more like an 11 o'clock sun, or maybe I might have that backwards. It might be closer to 1 o'clock than 11. But we'll leave it at 11, and if we need to change it in the next video, we can. Actually, we would change it closer to the end of the 4th video for this section, looking at the schedule for this. So, what we need off of here is, so the way I'm going to do this, I'm always going to put them in the same order, so I already know what order I'm going to use. Hours will be on the top, minutes, and then seconds on the bottom. But weird part is we're not going to use seconds, and the reason we aren't using seconds is we haven't set them. They have no meaning. So we're going to actually do hours, minutes, hours. So we'll grab hours. Actually, no, sorry. Before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to convert all of that, however, into something that can be understood by our game time. Remember, our game time is working in hours. So we can just pass hours in. So actually, we will grab it and just pass it in. Of course, it is a different type, so we'll drag off of here, and it should automatically convert the integer to float, like it just did. We're going to, since this one will be minutes, and again, this is hours, we have to think about this in terms of 60. So we're going to do float divided by float, the denominator. I can never remember which one. I think, yeah, denominator as 60. And we will drag in our minutes. We'll get them. And again, we'll put that there. We'll convert it. We need a little bit more room. Ooh, sorry. Just want to make that a little bit more organized. And then off of this one, we're going to have a very similar one. So I'm just going to duplicate that down here. Plug that in there. Except for this is going to be seconds. And to save you from doing the math, there are 36,000 seconds in an hour. Ooh, 36,000. Sorry, is that 36,000 or 3,600? 3,600, not 36,000. Sorry about that. Wow. Again, it's amazing that I can teach statistics. Drag this out here. Get. Again, ooh, I've used minutes up there. That was a mistake. Sorry about that. That should have been hours. Drag that in there. Plug that in. And do the same down here. Again, it will convert it. And this will initialize, okay, this is our initial game time. So if you wanted to put a setting in where players can change the game time, they can do it here. We'd also have to create a setting that would automatically update the sun's rotation for the second part of this section, but I honestly don't want to set that up that way. Next, we're going to have more in our calendar. We're going to have, the same setup. We're going to do day, month, year. I realize my fellow Americans still living in the U.S. might want this as month, day, year. You can do it that way if you prefer. It really makes no difference. Just be consistent. And when we make our arrays, be aware of what you're doing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler on what day I'm filming this on. Yeah, it's going to be surprising considering I've released a video today already, and it's several videos behind this one, I think. So I'm going to set my default day and month to actually what it is today. It's February 14th, 2019. Yep, Valentine's Day, when I released the fifth video or fourth video on YouTube for the first section. And we're going to put this in a section that we're going to call... Oh, wait, we already have calendar. I don't need to create a new section, do I? Or a new category. We're just going to plug those into there. And we're going to expose these as well. And you can copy your tooltips, change the name over as you need. I'm going to skip that for now. I'm also going to create another variable called game date. And this will be an array. So if you go up to variable type, you go to the side of integer here, there's this little teal bar of sorts. If you click it and drop down, the second item in the drop down is array. So change that to array. We aren't going to expose this, but we are going to move it to calendar. We're going to drag out our game date, and we're going to set that. Drag it out here. We're going to come off of the box under game date, and we're going to say make array. Now, this is the part where if you're using a different order than I am, you need to be mindful. Note what numbers are in the brackets here. So I'm always going to have my day as 0. If you're using the American system of month first, then your month will be 0 and your day will be 1. Whereas using the international standard, it will be day and then month, with month as 1. Speaking of which, I am actually going to change something on the month just to make my life easier as we get further in. I am going to change the scale of this from 1 to 12, both on the slider range and value range. The reason I'm doing this is it makes it easier when we want to display a month name instead of the number, which is something we might add in. I haven't quite decided yet if that is a good idea or not. And then I'm going to add a year into this bottom part. So every time I deal with this array or pull something from this array, these numbers must always be the same. If I change this once, I have to change it on all of them or the code won't work correctly. So, almost done here. Almost done. Now, I have already gone ahead and have tested some things out. In the way in which we will be setting things up as we move on, we have to actually sort of tell the game, we have to initialize the game speed twice, so to speak. And so to do that, we're going to actually create another new variable, which we'll call default game speed. I was looking at my cheat sheet. I had the wrong name on there. And that's part of the reason why I've been so confused. This will be of type float, and it will be a single variable and not an array. And you can go ahead and move that into your game speed settings. And we are going to take our game speed, just double checking my notes since I had the wrong thing in there earlier, and plug it into there. And while we're here, we're actually going to set our default value on our game speed to 150. And I'll explain why we are doing this in 1 second. And then we're going to take our default game speed and plug it into our game speed. And we're going to set our default game speed also to 150, but I have to compile first so I can get the default value. Plug that in. Now I'm going to copy and paste something in from my notes, and this is just something I worked out, again, by having plugged in multiple numbers. I'm just going to actually set that as a comment on top of this. So the reason why we're setting it to 150 is that 150, one real life hour, becomes 1 day. If we wanted this to be realistic, we would set this to 3600, similar to this number, so that 1 second actually had the value of 1 second. If we wanted to go really fast, we wanted 1 second to be 1 hour, we'd set it to 60. If we wanted 1 second to be 1 game hour, we would set it to 1. There are a whole bunch of different settings you can do for this. So there we go. We've now set our initial game clock. No, I'm actually going to move this up here so it's not covering as much. Now we need to actually have the game clock develop some functionality. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create two new functions. And one of them will be set clock, which we'll take care of first, which will set our game time. So the way this one's going to start is we're going to start by calculating our seconds. So we're going to drag off our seconds from, we're going to set our seconds from set clock, and we're going to drag back from seconds. Actually, no, we're not going to drag back from seconds. We're going to take game time. Just like we did in the function library, we're going to take this, which is working in hours, and convert it to seconds. So to do so, we need to multiply this. So it'll be float multiplied by float, or float times float. It'll be our 3600, not 36,000. And that will take our game time, take the hours from it, which are set to 12, turn it into a whole bunch of seconds. It will not go directly into there, but we're going to do what we did earlier with that division, whole, and remainder. So I'm going to drag off here, division, whole, and remainder. And the divisor for this one is going to be a bit confusing. So I'm not going to put it in just yet. I'm going to put in the next thing we're going to include, which will be our minutes. So if I drag off, or if I drag minutes and put it over our set seconds there, we have set minutes. The reason I have done this, and I'm going to drag these a little bit further out, so I have a little bit more room, a little bit further actually. The reason why I'm doing this is if we are going from hours to seconds to set our seconds, then we're going from seconds to minutes. What we need to think about putting in here isn't anything related to our seconds, but our minutes. Or actually in relation to both. So we're going to put in the number of seconds it takes to make a minute, which is 60. If you didn't know that, I'm probably going to suggest you stop doing this tutorial now. So we are going to come off of here and we're going to get the floor. What this does is it rounds it to the nearest whole number. I want to double check if it rounds it down or not. To the largest previous integer. So it will round down. That will go into our seconds. Remember, the remainder, in this case, will be our seconds. The whole value will be our minutes. So any number greater than 60, so any number coming in is our seconds, greater than 60 is a minute. That is our return value, our whole value. And the remainder value, the part that comes after that, 1 point whatever. So if we have 65 come in here, that will have a remainder of 5. That goes into here as our seconds. The 1 will come off of here, and it'll go into our set minutes, which we are going to take care of in a very similar way. We're just going to copy and paste this division, whole, and remainder. And likewise, I'm going to just drag the next part off, which will be hours. And we put hours there. So it makes sense that we have 60 again here, doesn't it? Because, there are 60 minutes in an hour. So we drag off this remainder. It will convert it for us. Just put it there. So make sure it's actually a straight line since it was showing up like it wasn't. Should have copied this floor as well because we'll need that. And again, whatever comes out after, 66 minutes will, be divided by, actually it divides at 61. So once we get to 61, it divides every second, sorry. It divides every time it comes through. Once this number that comes through is 61, however, the remainder becomes 1. That passes through here, and we get a 1. And the part that was the 60 goes through here and passes into hours, adding yet another hour to our day. I'm going to copy both of these parts and set it there. Now, we aren't going to divide by 60 this time. There are only 24 hours in a day. So I'm going to change that to 24. I'm not going to worry about the return value because that's being taken care of in the function library and being taken care of in a part we'll get to in a second. So that comes into there. Alright, so now we have set a function up that will calculate we'll take our hours from our game time, convert it into seconds. Actually, it takes more than hours. Go back to our event graph. It takes our day, sorry, not our day. It takes our hours as hours, our minutes. It takes hours and converts them to seconds. Adds these together as one large float. That float gets passed through here. divided by 3600. I have 36,000 in there, even though I said not to do that. 3600. It takes that value and divides it by 60. The remaining number, which in our case will actually be 0, goes through there as our seconds. And when I say in our case, if you remember, our defaults are 12 on the hour, or 11 on the hour, and 0 on the minutes and seconds. So it will pass through as 0 in the end when it starts. We'll set our seconds. The remainder after that number will pass through here as our hours, and we will have a remainder of 11 based off our initial time. Sorry, we'll have a remainder of 6,600. Sorry, we'll have a whole return value of 660. I think, if I'm doing my mental math right. In fact, I'm just going to open up a calculator in front of all of you guys. Actually, no, I'm just going to double check my math to make sure I'm telling you the right thing. So, again, it's surprising I can teach stats, but I can't do basic arithmetic on the fly like this. Secret is, in stats, no one expects you to remember the formulas. And you have calculators and tables that do a lot of the work for you. So, if we are passing through... At this point, Yep, it was 660, I was right. Okay, I don't know why I had to double up some really basic mathematics there. So, what will come through here is 660. That gets divided by 60. The remainder is 0 at the start, which will become 0 here for our starting minutes. The return value is passed through here. It is divided by 11. The remainder of what's passed through, by the way, which is going to be 11 over 24, is returned as the remainder, which is 11, and we get that over here. Now, I'm going to add some debugging code in. I'm going to set it all the way, in a really weird location. I'm going to go all the way down here, and I'm going to type in print string. If you don't know how to use print string yet, let me know. I'll create a video just for that. Because understanding... Oh, I skipped a step, actually. Understanding how to use this is important. Sorry, I was talking about setting our time, and we have to finish setting it. So now that we've set it, we actually have to put it together again. We have to put it back into our game clock. So we're going to drag off of here first before we do the debugging. Otherwise, the debugging will not work. And we're going to do what we did before. We're going to make array. Now, when I do this on my own, I just copy and paste the original array. But again, you need to be mindful of what you are doing here. So if you remember the original array, actually I didn't make an original array for this one, I did it for the calendar. We are going to get our seconds, we're going to plug it into 0, so it always will be 0 in every one we do. Minutes will always be 1, and hours will always be 2. I am now going to take this and plug it into my debugging code. And I'm going to take this from game data, and I'm going to type in get. I'm going to get a copy, and I am going to duplicate that a couple of times. So I have 3 now, and I'm going to change this to 1. Oh, not 10. Sorry. 1 and 2. So I have 0, 1, 2, 3. Had to reroute in, plug that in, plug that in. Going to drag that so it's a little bit prettier, even though I'm going to delete this when we get to the 4th video in this section, because we won't need it at that point. Before we get here, however, I am going to make it pretty enough so it's just easier for us to read. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to type in toString. From here, off the string, I'm going to type in oh, actually, you know what? Delete this. There's an easier way to do this. That will automatically do that for us as we go. We want to do build string from integer. Actually, I was right the first time. But we're going to plug that into the number 1. And we are going to take the 0 and use that as the append to. So, what this is doing is it's taking our seconds... Sorry, I've done this backwards. There should be 2, 1, 0 in this case, because we're talking about displaying the time. It's going to take our hours. It's going to convert it to a string. So whatever number is in our hours, in this case starting at 11, it will convert it to a string. in the preface, I am going to put colon. Now, you might want spaces on either side of it if you want it to be a bigger clock. I don't really mind for this. I don't want to put spaces in. It's not going to change the readability for me. And now we have this set up. And I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to duplicate it. And I am going to take the seconds, the 0 here, and plug it into the init, or in integer. And I'm going to take the return value and apply that to the append to in the second build string. And now I'm going to plug this all into here. So when it runs, it will print a string on the side of the screen for me that will show the game time. So that actually finishes out the clock for us. And we're going to close that out. Compile and save first, make sure there are no errors. Compiler results, nope, no errors. Close that out. And in here, we're back in here now. So, as I said, we needed to set two functions after this. We finished one, so let's pass that through now. So we are now going to set our clock, and it will start running, and it'll update this, and we'll get new times, which will update this, and it will just keep looping through in its own little way. And now we're going to set our calendar. So we'll create a new function, and we'll say set. I have the lurking suspicion again that I spelled that wrong, but whatever. I always get doubtful of my spelling when I'm doing these things. So in this one, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to set our day. Now, what this is doing, it's really updating our day. As I've mentioned, when this information goes through here, again, game data, let's actually go back into our set clock for a second. So as the seconds come through, anything that's over 60 gets turned into a minute. Anything in minutes that's over 60 gets converted to an hour. And then anything over 24 kind of vanishes from here, right? Well, as it vanishes, what's really happening with that number is it is still being carried forward. It's just being carried forward in other parts of the setup we have. So when we're in our calendar, sorry for all the clicking you can hear, we can actually take that number, add it to our day, and then set our day from that. So we're going to take day again. We're going to drag off of it. We're going to hit plus, and we're going to do integer plus integer. And we're going to plug that into day, and we're going to take day counter and plug it into the lower part of that equation. So what this is doing is it comes in, it sets day based on the current day plus the day counter. So if the day counter is ticked up 1, this will add 1 to here, and we'll get a different day here. If it hasn't, it remains the same. Now, from here, we're going to drag off a branch. And this is going to be the little bit more complex part of this section. We have a couple of things we want to do. We want to drag off of here to set up our branch, and we want to do less than. I'm just going to plug the return value to our condition there. And what we want to do is we want to set it to be less than the number of days in the month. Now, fortunately, we don't have to create a table or an enum. Actually, it would be a structure most likely. We don't have to create a structure or our own function that gets the numbers of days in a month. In fact, actually, there is a function built in called day in month, or days in month, which actually has leap years built in as well. And what it needs to know what our year is. So we're going to plug our year in. And it needs to know what our month is. So we're going to plug our month in. So based on the year and month, so if it's a leap year, that really kind of matters for that one. Based on the year, it figures out how many days are in that month. Outside of leap years, they're all pretty much the same. So it doesn't change, that is. Each month has yeah, you know what I mean. It's pretty much the same. Leap years, we get an extra day in February. It checks if the current day value is greater than the value for that month. If it is, well, we don't want our day counter to keep going up. We don't want to go to have 33 days suddenly, or 32 days, or what have you. We instead want to set it. We don't want to set it to 0. We want to set it to 1 because there's no day 0. And we also want to set our month at this point. So, this one's pretty easy. We hard-coded it. It just restarts. Month works similarly to how day does here, except for we don't have a month counter, as you've noticed. And fortunately, months are fairly simple. It goes 1 to 12. So we're just going to type in plus off month here. We're going to leave this as 1 because it's just adding 1 to it. And we're going to get month and plug that in. Once this hits 12 and we add another one, it will start over at 1 automatically for us because we set that limit. Also, because of the next thing we're going to do, it will kind of set the limit a second time. So if we drag off of this month, we're going to create a new branch. And this is where we're going to set that sort of secondary limit to the number of months. Drag off your false from the original, oops, sorry, not the original branch itself. Drag off the false, don't drag the original branch. Plug it into the input for the new branch we've created. And what we're going to do here is we're going to check if the number of months is less than 12. So we're going to put 12 there, and we're going to plug months in here, not years. Oh, sorry, I used an integer instead of a float. So less than and integer, not float. Set that to 12, not 120. Drag off month, plug that in. Okay, so now it's going to check, well, is our month greater than 12? Now, if we're coming off this false, it's automatically going to be false. But we just need to carry the information through, so we have to go through this way. Now, if it is, we're going to have, off of this one, we're going to have two different sort of outcomes. We don't have to reset the months. It will do that for us, or roll over to the next one. Actually, sorry, no, we do have to reset the months. It won't roll over for us. So we're going to do that first, just like we did with day. And just like with day, there's no month 0, so it becomes month 1. And we are going to set our year. And just like how we set our month, it's going to be just a simple integer plus integer, with that as a 1. And we're just adding 1 year to our current year. So that sets up our year. And now we need to set up this game data. And again, as I was saying earlier, this is where you need to be really careful. You have to set this up the same way as we did before. So say make array. And in fact, actually, I'm going to drag this down first, because the false off of this will come in here. We won't, if it is less than 12, then we don't need to set the month or the year. It stays the same, but we do still need to pass all of this previous information, including our day and month, into our game data. Our year won't change, so our set year that we've defaulted at, or whatever year it's been updated to, will come into this automatically. We're going to create 3 pins, and just like I did before, I'm going to use the international system of day, month, year. Again, this must be exactly the same as what we have in the event graph, and anywhere else we do this at. If you change it, this code will not work. Now, if you want, let's open up the clock for a second. We can take this stuff, and we can actually copy and paste it. We can copy and paste it over. I didn't think we were going to do the debugging, but we will. We'll plug this in. We're going to change this to 0. So that'll be the first one. We will change this to, we'll leave that as 1, and change this last one to 2, so it'll be year. And I'm going to change that to a slash, and change that to a slash. Now, oh, yeah, also make sure you plug in what you're getting from. Don't do what I just did. Make sure to plug in what array this information you want is coming from. Otherwise, you'll get that error that I just got. Compile and save. Okay, so let's test this and see if it works. Nope, it is not working. So we have a little bit more to do. That's fine. Let's go back into our setup here. Let's go into our event graph. Now, as I said, we have something else we have to do. We have to set our calendar. Now our calendar will update properly. So I'm just going to test it again. Compile, save, and run it. Again, it's still not working. So let's just go in here for a second. Oh, we can't debug this, unfortunately. That's, yeah, slightly problematic. So, well, there's still some things we need to do. And in fact, as I said earlier, we sort of have to set our default starting game time a few times. So we're going to set it for the final time, and we're going to pull from that interface from earlier. So we have update game speed, and it'll come up as a... Okay. Try that again. Update game. Give me 1 second, just want to make sure I haven't made a mistake in how I set up that library, because that is not what we should be seeing. Oh, sorry, not the library. Yep, I skipped a step. I don't mean to go to the interface. I know what I did wrong. Sorry about that. First things first, we need to actually set up this blueprint to accept the interface. So to do so, click the RTS Game State BP self, go to Class Settings, Add Interface, and let's just search for our interface, which is RTS, and which only have one that's RTS right now, GameTime IF for interface, and there we go. Now we can call in that function from that interface, which is game speed. So we want to call game speed. We don't want it as a message. Okay, why are you not wanting to cooperate with me? Update game speed. Update. Wow, on my test run, this ran perfectly fine. Why are we not working correctly? Just gonna again double check my interface. Speed multiplier, public, default. Just gonna compile this one more time and save it. Just every so often, that little glitch where you have to compile and save a couple of times to get things to work right happens. I'm gonna compile and save this just to make sure that the interface actually is working. I'm gonna double check that I've put the interface in. I have. Okay. Update game speed. There we go. We want the add event one. Just had to compile a couple extra times. Sorry about that. Every so often, if you can't get something to come up that should be coming up like that, just recompile a couple of times. See what comes out. So we haven't set up our speed multiplier yet. So that's the last variable we need to set up. And that will be a float. We'll call it speed multiplier. This needs to default to 1, so we have to compile before we do anything else. Set it to 1, put it in the game speed settings, and we are going to set it. It will actually get set somewhere else, but we need it to default to 1 because we will be using this value as the game starts. And because we're going to multiply it, turn context sensitive back on if you turned it off like I did, as float times float. And we're multiplying it by the default game speed. If it is not set to 1, the default game speed will become 0 suddenly. Sorry, if it's set to 0, the game speed will become 0. And we will want that at some point, like when we want to do a pause of the game. And now, the pause we will create isn't an actual proper game pause. The ticks will still be going on in the background, just everything else will stop. So, from that, what we are going to do is we are going to set our game time. And that is going to go into here. And then we are going to create a new event dispatcher. So if you go down to event dispatchers under variables, click event dispatcher, and this will be our game speed control. So anytime we want this function or this branch to go off, we're actually going to call this event dispatcher. And we're going to add a new input. So the input isn't at the bottom for this one, it's at the top. And it's going to be of float. Just want to double check before I did that. Yeah, that is a float, right? Yes, it is. And this will be game time. We're going to drag that in. It's going to be a call. We're going to call this one. And there we go. We plug game time into game time, and the execute from set game time into the call game speed control. We hit compile. Ooh. Just want to see what I've skipped, because clearly I have skipped something for that error to come up. And I'm just going to very quickly in my master copy find... No, I haven't skipped anything. Why are we getting... Oh, okay, hang on. Sorry about that. So this happens to me every so often. Compile, drag the event dispatcher back in, hit call. It will work now. What happened, and I wish I hadn't deleted that as quickly as I did, is the node here didn't set properly. Thus the error we got. That actually happened when I first did this. So compile it again, no error, hit play. We're still not getting any time. Well, what are we skipping? Well, that's a good question. What are we skipping? What haven't we done yet? Well, we've set our... Let's double check what we've set. Make sure everything is set up properly so far. So we get our delta time and our game speed. We divide our speed, or our delta time by our game speed. So we turn it from being, 1 second into 150 seconds pretty much. We add that to our initial game time. The remainder of that goes into here. It is divided by 24. Anything greater than 24 gets turned into is the return value, the whole number that gets passed on to day count. Anything less than 24 that remains, or as a remainder, gets passed on as a float to our game time, like we want. We initialize this in our game state, where we call this up. Our game time is, our delta time is set by our delta seconds. Our game speed is set here. Just want to make sure all my defaults are in properly. 150. Game time is set up there, so I don't need to worry about that. Pass it into game time, pass it into there. Yep, that's all right. So make sure hours, minutes, hours. Yep. Yep, that's right. That's also right. Well, the issue is... Well, what is the issue? Why isn't it printing? Let me just double check something on some of my... Yeah, no, it should work. Oh, yeah. We need one more variable. Sorry about that. I'm just going to make sure that I haven't skipped anything else, though, before we do that. Not one more variable, one more function. Because this should automatically work without that function. That function is something we'll need later on. But I just want to double check I haven't skipped anything. So we're taking game time. We are, dividing it by that, which is right. We are passing it through there, which is right. We're passing it through here, which is correct, and into minutes. We're taking that. Yep. Seconds, minutes, hours. Yep. Hours, minutes, seconds. Yep, that's in the right order. That actually shouldn't matter. It's this part that will matter. You know what we're going to do, actually, just because I know this code should be working, is we're actually going to unplug this one. We're going to compile and save, and to see if it's having an issue printing two things up on the screen for me. No. Okay. Well, I'm going to plug that back in. Ooh, not going to drag that off. I'm going to day, month, year in the right order. I'm going to double check my event graph to make sure I didn't do anything stupid there. day, month, year. Yep, in the right order. Go over here, just make sure I have everything set up correctly. So as we come in, we pass that in. So current day, add day counter, add that on. That's all right. Reset the day, add a new, set the month based on the new month. If the month is less than 12, or sorry, greater than 12, reset the month to 1, add a new year, elsewise continue on. And day, month, year. Yep, that's all right. Well, this is strange. Why is this? Oh, sorry. You know what? I'm a giant idiot. Wanna know why? We skipped a very important step. The reason why this isn't working, and it's kind of ironic that I'm doing this in the first video, first video of this section, because it's the same mistake I intentionally made in the first video of the first section, or the first lesson ever for this. We have one more thing we need to do to get game time to work. We haven't told the system yet what our game state is. So go back into our blueprints, go to our game settings, and open our game mode up. And go to our game state and set it to our actual new game state. Compile, save. Go to your map, make sure your world settings have the right game state in it. It does. Hit play, and you will see a lot of information going by. You have the date, the time. Older times are towards the bottom, by the way. And you can see it's ticking up. There we go. Now, this is a little bit slow, so just to make sure that everything is working, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it. I am going to go back into the game state, and I am going to change the default game speed for a moment here. And I'm going to change the default, and I'm going to change the actual game speed as well from 150. And I'm going to double check what I want to change this to, because I have a number I tend to use for it. And of course, I don't have that open. And I can't open it without turning off this video, and that causes issues for me. So instead, what we're going to do is we are going to set this to 0.0025. It's an extremely small number, which will give us really, okay. I forgot to put the point in the front of that. There we go. Extremely small number, so it should go by very quickly. Notice the times are, it's okay, it's a little too quick, but what we're looking for is to make sure the month is going up. It is. It's turning into well, you can see it's going up. It started at 2, it's down in July. Just want to make sure the year ticks over as well. We're now in November, December, and now 2020. And we're back in February, so we know that all the little bits and bobs of that are working. So we can change our game state back to 150 for our defaults. Don't worry, as we get farther into this, we'll actually have an easier way of changing this down the road. Compile and save that. And that finishes up what we are going to do for this section. In the next section, in this lesson, in the next lesson of the second section of this tutorial series, we will set up our day and night cycle. We will get this little sun to move all the way around as if it was orbiting a globe. Now, I will say it won't be the prettiest, and I'm going to show you why right now. Smallest issue, and I don't tend to do visual work, I leave that for other people, with this is, I'm going to go to details for a second. And we are going to, I know the actual object's down there. What we're going to do is we're going to change to rotate for a minute. Actually, it's going to be easier if I do it over here so I can see both of them. And we're going to just rotate this downwards. I just want you to see what will happen. So I just need to build the lighting real quick. This should go by fairly quickly. I haven't actually built any lighting with you guys here before. So I'm not sure if the device I'm using to record will slow it down. Oh, no, it was still pretty quick. Okay, for some reason, our sun hasn't moved. Let me just do something real quick. Eject. Oh, I know why it hasn't moved. Okay, sorry, let me just change one quick thing. There we go. Build lighting. I'm going to undo what everything I've done, by the way. Once the lighting is built, there we go. I think this is just trying to be a jerk to me to... no, I'm skipping a step still. Okay, there we go. This is what happens. You get this pinkness on the horizon, and that's just because of settings in here, actually. And as I said, I don't do visual stuff, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I am setting up functionality and blueprints. You guys can change out this, based on how we're going to do this, you can change out to any sky sphere you want. You can change out to any sun or light source you want. But yeah, just based on the defaults we have, we're going to not always have the prettiest nights, or the most night-like nights. So I'm just going to undo all of those little things I've done. And I'm going to just go back to my sky sphere. I'm going to update the lighting again. And I'm going to rebuild the lighting. Of course, just watch me having hit undone all those times. I'm already back to having had the light at static. Yep, that is the case probably. Okay, I think that's about where it was before. And let's go back to... actually, you know what? I have my cheat sheet, one of my cheat sheet ones of this open still. I don't want the actual thing that will be making the sun move. We're just going to plug in the original rotations, because these rotations are the default rotations we get when we start this up. Now let's go back to our sky sphere, update material, sun's back up there, everything is back where we started. Okay, so I'm going to set everything back to the default for the light. We're going to just build the lighting, and as it's building, I'm going to say my usual spiel here. You know, again, any likes are appreciated. It lets me know that I'm bringing you content you value. Comments are greatly appreciated. It lets me know what is working in the series for you, what is not working, what you want to see more of, what you don't want to see any of, what you want me to add in, and all that fun stuff. And remember to subscribe and hit that notify bell so you know when the next tutorial is out. And as always, I hope to see you in the next lesson, and I also hope that you have a wonderful day.